Okay, Nicole, let's kick this off with, for anyone who's listening who's clicked on this, they will
Mm,
go soil, they will go ecology, they will go farming and go,
mm.
how is this relevant to everyone? How does this intertwine all of life?
Because it intertwines all of life, right? It's the reason for our existence on this planet. And I think what's interesting to me is the disconnect of people realizing this relates to everything that you care about. You know, if you care about well being, if you care about water quality or climate change, any of it comes down to soil.
Wow.
And
So,
like, if we're
Name me something that doesn't come
okay,
to
let's go
soil.
with well-being.
Let's
Okay,
play a game. Play a game.
someone listening. I'm in London.
Yeah.
I love running. I work in a tech company.
I've
I'm
got
really,
two
I,
kids.
I care about what I eat. How does soil affect me?
At every single level, right? From secondary metabolites, vitamins, enzymes, food quality, just on that piece, you know, what nourishes you, the microbiology. So you are more microbe in and on you than you are human cells, right? It's the same in the plant, like a 10-to-1 ratio. There's 10 microbial cells inside a plant for every one plant cell. And then it's the same in the soil. So we have this incredible abundance and diversity that then relates to what comes through in our food, from things like ergothioneine, the longevity amino acid comes from fungi that live in the soil that then pass through into a plant. So you can't replicate this stuff in a laboratory. You can't grow it in hydroponics. It has to come from soil.
That's secondary metabolites.
everything-
Secondary metabolites.
so everything, all life comes back to soil.
Yeah.
Build off that for us.
Yeah. So think the whole soil building process came about from a relationship with a fungus joining together with a plant, right? So if you think 420 million years ago, you guys were quite young then. Fungi ruled the planet, and these things were like 3 meters high, these massive, great big phallic structures of the fungal, just they very phallic. And they didn't capture sunlight energy. What they did is they were able to use acids to etch away on the rocks and then take those minerals and build their structures. And at the same time, plants were in the sea. You know, they were seaweeds and they were very happy there. And they had all the sunlight that they could possibly need because they take that energy from the sun to build their bodies. There were minerals in the sea and there's more than enough water, and something changed. So potentially we saw changes in sea level, and the plant and the fungus had a conversation, and the fungi was like, hey, dude, I can get these minerals. And the plant's like, well, I'll give you sugar, and became the sugar daddy for the fungus. And they built this relationship. And then from that very beginning relationship, it enabled plants to come up out of the sea. But then through taking sugars from the sun, well, not from the sun, but
Photosynthesizing.
photosynthesis, right?
CHO.
CHO, they started dumping that down into the ground and they started to build soil.
CHO is carbohydrate, as in.
Carbohydrate. But
Sugar.
the soil building process doesn't happen without a relationship with plants and microbiology.
And microbiology being fungi.
Fungi and bacteria and protozoa. So the whole thing started to drive, and we started to see soil building processes, and when oxygenation was happening beforehand, but trees and everything started to grow and the world transformed.
So previous to that, there wasn't greenery, there wasn't trees, there wasn't plants.
Nothing. It was like Mars or rocks. It was just rocks.
Wow.
So fungi really were a really
The
Instigator.
terraformers. They
terraformer, the building block of
Yeah.
soil, which is in
Yeah.
essence predicated our existence.
yes.
Wow.
Yeah. So all the plants that you eat, you got to thank that plant for its fungal biological relationship.
So just to recap, Kat, because there's so much in that, my mind already feels slightly cracked open. 10-to-1 relationship between bacteria to humans. So for anyone who's kind of going, oh, I don't like bacteria and I love my antibacterial spray, it has a place. But however,
You
we
are
are
more-
we are
yeah.
more bacteria than we are human. Plants are 10-to-1 ratio. Similarly, soil is 10-to-1. So there's this kind of relationship that all of life, in essence, is reliant on bacteria and microorganisms. And the
Yes.
health and diversity of microorganisms
Yeah.
affects the health of everything.
Yeah, and I think you could look at Pasteur and that kind of process of like germ theory that microbes were bad, whereas actually microbiology and even viruses, you know, we only think of viruses in terms of COVID. These organisms are incredibly beneficial. And if we change the environment, even organisms that are disease organisms actually become beneficial. So it's all about that landscape that we're curating in our own bodies and in the soil. Is those disease organisms are indicators of something, of a dysbiosis, or there's something wrong in the system.
Yeah, you used the term signals because,
Yes.
for
all about the
example,
signals.
we had a wonderful Nicole came and walked around the farm and shared so much
So
wisdom
fun.
with us, so much wisdom. And one thing, we were there standing over by where Chris is. This is handsome Chris, or Chris Somerville, who runs the farm, who's phenomenal. And Chris was worried about that. You know, if we get all kind of dandelions and they go to seed and the wind blows the seed heads in on top of our crops, we're going to have like a big burst of dandelions.
Mhm.
And you were all like, yeah, but it's all about the signals.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that? Because that's that kind of relates to everything, really. It's the signal. Because if people
does.
Wait,
feel
you're
like,
answering. Wait.
sorry,
No, it's great. And I
Yeah.
think these signals are going on all the time. There's signals in your body right now for health or well-being, or the signal from your gut to your brain. Everything's about communication. And these signaling metabolites in the soil are like parts per trillion that'll actually signal to a seed to germinate. So that seed is sitting there in the soil waiting for certain conditions. And those conditions are determined by your management, your microbial imbalances or your mineral balances, or what's happening with soil structure. So let's say you have compaction or you have waterlogging or surface crusting, you'll get a different plant germinating. So that might be dandelions or moss or pennyroyal, dock,
Chickweed.
thistles. Chickweed are all receiving a different signal. So you can see fields or gardens right next to each other and they'll have a totally different community because of how someone's been managing.
Yeah, we drove down, Shawnee, who's the other side of the camera, we were driving down by through a housing estate on our way here the other week. There was a whole lot of dandelions on the side verge.
Mm-hmm.
We were discussing, well, what environment would be perfect for dandelions to be there?
Mm-hmm.
And Shawnee, very, very smartly, which could be correct, or now we find out from the teacher, is that he said, well, there's loads of dandelions there. Dandelions have deep roots, so the soil is probably very compacted. So the dandelion's purpose here is to crack open the soil and create more aeration for other species to come in.
Nice one, Sean. Yeah.
Hey! 10 out of 10, Sean Kyle.
Yeah. But they can also be, so these conditions could be interrelated, but it could also relate to something like high potassium that will also cause a germination signal. If they are trying to crack a soil open, it could be low functional calcium. So there's minerals that are involved that influence what's growing above the ground.
Okay. Does the pick me please, teacher? Does the
Dave's raising his
does
hand just
this,
in case.
like, so say for anyone who's listening here and who's kind of going, like, the land, if the land is left unattended to, the land will tell you immediately. You can read the land and determine in what case, in like, the land is always in a state of evolution, but by looking at it, it tells a story.
Yeah. And I think one of my funnest expeditions was coming up against the face of a glacier in New Zealand, South Island. And you can walk from the glacial face, so highly disturbed, where it's kind of carving away or retreating, and you just get rocks, right? And then you take a couple of steps and you'll get moss and lichen. They don't need any soil. You know, they got acids they can etch away on the rock. And then you take another couple of steps and there's scrambling plants, ones that throw up a lot of seed heads, annuals, short time. And then you take a few more steps and there'll be your deep taprooting species. And then we'll start to get annual grasses. And you keep walking down the track and we get more perennial grasses. And then you get into shrubs. And then by the time
Perennial means
for,
Every year.
Yeah, that they don't live just for 1 year. Like an
Okay.
annuals is there for, we say, a short time. A good time, not a long time.
Okay, annual is good time, long time, and perennial is
Annual one night
Perpetuity.
stand.
One night stand, that's
Yeah.
right. Or 1 year stand.
Yeah.
And then by the time you get to the car park, you've got this beautiful old growth forest. Right?
wow.
And so that is that's a biological succession. So there's different microbial partners that are happening all along that track depending on the amount of disturbance. And what us humans like to do is we're just disturbing, full stop, right? We create a lot of disturbance. So that might be tillage or overgrazing. And what we end up with is a big bacterial overgrowth. And you can kind of think about this in the human terms. And I like to relate soil to the human body because I think we've all got a human body and we all kind of relate to it in different ways. But it's like a lot of this disturbance causes overgrowths. So bacterial overgrowths. And if it was the human body, it could be things like candida. right?
Autoimmune diseases or
Autoimmune diseases. So you can almost think of like modern monocultural farming being like an autoimmune disorder, right? And we end up with all of these secondary issues, which might be pests, weeds, diseases.
wow.
Can
I just wanted to
love
ask,
that you
there was
guys
one
are holding
thought,
your
there was
hands
one
up.
thought-
we're peppering.
There's
We're
one thought
excited.
just coming right
I
through
can't
me, and
pick
it's
a
kind of going.
favorite.
if we were, say, for example, there was a plot of land and us humans disappeared for whatever, 100 years, is the probability that nature's desire is to create complex ecosystems such as old growth forest? Like if we all disappeared as humans within 100 years, 150 years, there'd be old growth forests everywhere because it's a complex ecosystem. And my understanding is that nature's desire is to keep kind of evolving and becoming more and more complex. And human intervention is, we control this and change this and manage this to facilitate our own needs in terms of food production or different forms of land uses. But if we stopped intervening, nature's evolution would continue us within, it's almost got these little armies. There's the first battalion, which, as you said, might be these, things that lichen or things like this. And then there's deep root, tap roots. And then there's other things to break up the soil. And then it continues until eventually there's trees and animals and insects and the whole evolution.
So the disturbance depends on where you're at. So if you're at the top of Mount Everest, the disturbance is altitude.
Yeah.
Right? You're not going to find an old growth forest on the top of that. But if you look at where the greatest grasslands in the world are, so the Pampas or the Hungarian steppes or the American prairies, they're all in rain shadows. So the disturbance is actually low rainfall and then fire. So where we find the highest complexity and diversity is on the edge. So it's on the edge of the forest, or if an old growth tree, like the mother tree, falls, you get this incredible burst of disturbance. So of diversity, but it's almost like disturbance is part of nature. There's always this flux and this flow and systems, whatever. And I like to think that some humans, I call them the keystone humans, are creating more diversity around them. And those are the people I love working with, is finding those ones that, like, what does it look like to have incredibly vibrant and alive ecosystems and not be the ones that are creating monocultures?
We started one of Ireland's first juice bars back in about 2005 and literally have been juicing for over 30 years. It's one of the quickest way to rebuild your immune system and literally get the essence of any fruit and veg. It's something I do regularly to ensure that my kids are getting more fruit and veg and more high nutrient dense foods.
Yeah, we've partnered with a company called Nama Juicers. They make incredible quality juicers. They've innovated the standard juicer. It's an upright masticating juicer with a hopper. That means that you can juice hands-free. So you simply load the fruit and veg up the top and you don't have to, you just step away and it juices itself. It makes super high quality juice where the pulp literally comes out dry and it's easy to clean. They come with a 15-year warranty. They're offering you 10% off with the code HAPPYPAIR10. That's simply go to namawell.com, use the code HAPPYPAIR10 for 10% off at the checkout.
Wonderful juicer, couldn't recommend them more. We're all about nature, health, and living a natural way of life. Back about 8 years ago, a friend, Tony Riddle, suggested I have a pair of shoes, lads, that are going to transform your life. And it's like, go away, Tony.
They were a pair of Vivo Barefoot shoes. They really were. They're amazing. They're minimalist, they're eco-friendly, and they're designed to let your feet move as freely as they would barefoot. It's about getting closer to nature with every step you take. They really are amazing shoes. They come in ranges for men's, women, for all aspects. Kids.
They're a B Corp company, which means they're certified as being people working in a sustainable manner. Amazing people. We've hung out with them loads, and they really are at the forefront of health.
We believe in them so much that we've become ambassadors. It's all we've worn for the last 8 years. For running, for streetwear, for, they're
even tuxedos. When I wear a tuxedo, I got a nice kind of formal pair. So they do offer a full range. Use the code HAPPYPAIR20 to get 20% off your next pair.
And even as soon as I've got a baby girl, Fia, she's 8 months old. And as soon as she starts walking, I will definitely make sure she starts with a pair of Vivo Barefoot shoes because they have a wide toe box, a minimal sole, and they'll really help connect her with nature and her natural movement.
Research has shown that if you do wear a pair of Vivo Barefoot shoes within a number of months, your foot strength will increase by 60%.
So check them out, 20% off with the code HAPPYPAIR20 at checkout, vivobarefoot.com.
Yeah, that's one thing I'd love to talk about is that, like, we see soil as something that's dirty or something that's to get off our boots or something to wash off our hands, or it's dirty. Whereas, like, I think I spoke about this with you during the week, that I remember it was the first time I read Dan Barber's book. I think it was The Third Plate, where he talked about how as soil became more degraded or more degraded, so did economic wealth, so did education, so did economic prosperity, that they were all
And
intertwined.
health.
That it was like we think of ourselves in modern day culture, 75% of people live in urban environments. So we're
Yeah.
very disconnected from our food system and our soil, but the quality of our soil directly impacts all aspects. I wonder if
Mm-hmm.
you could talk about this, because this
Yeah.
just really iterates the importance of how we treat the soil is how we treat ourselves.
Yeah. And I think that's the point, is there's no separation, and you can sit there in an office with your air conditioning and feel like there's no climate change because it's always 24 degrees in your apartment or whatever. And it's that separation from the reality of actually we're all embedded in this. There is no soil is over there. It's like it's influencing every single aspect of your life. And, if we look at climate
It's
change.
a really hard one to gather that one though.
It
Like it's
is.
really hard. Like, that's the one that the linkages.
Well, you wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
Where are you going to get your food? Like, you're just going to grow hydroponically and not have soil. It's that, think of and consider that not you guys, because you have a farm, but people that live in cities have half the diversity of the microbiome that a farmer does. And you have about 1/10 of the biodiversity that someone living in the Amazon has. And what that has is massive consequences. So they looked at the gut microbiome in the 1950s, and I don't know how they compared it. It's so interesting, but they compared it to the microbiome today. And the population has dramatically lost that diversity. And one of the organisms that most humans have lost is an organism that tells you that you're full. Like the organism that's like, you're satiated, you've had enough food. We no longer have it in modern urban communities. And it's like, where do those organisms come from? They come from the soil. There's a microbe right now that they're looking at creating a vaccine for first responders that are dealing with high trauma. So people in the military or ambulance or fire, what this microbe does is, in your body, it helps build resilience. It helps your body bounce back after trauma. It's like the ultimate antidepressant, anti-PTS, and it's in the soil. And so this exposure to these microbes is what gives us our overall vibrancy and health, and we're missing it.
That would make sense, because if you think of healthy plants have to build up healthy defense systems against predators, and therefore when we eat these healthy plants, they have these compounds which make us healthy. And I guess it's the same principle must transfer to us as evolved life forms. We're obviously different to plants, but we're still part of biology.
Yeah, and we've almost, like, if you think about like our bodies, but then the human's body, the plant's stomach is outside of its body. So it outsources everything to its microbial community. So you have the microbiome inside you. The plant has the microbiome, outside and around it. And
expand on that, how? Because that sounds
so. The plant depends if it's coming under an insect attack, or even if it's been grazed, or there's some kind of diseases on it. It will send a signal out its roots that it's communicating and saying, "Hey, I need a little bit of zinc." Or I need this kind of it's an induced systemic response. So basically the plant's defense system is activated by the microbes outside of its body. Now, if it doesn't have those microbes in the soil because you've been cultivating or you've been spraying with a lot of ag chemicals, that plant's communicating and no one's responding. But also what's happening is we're breeding plants to have a whole lot of nitrogen and phosphorus, potassium, fertilizers and fungicides and pesticides. So plants have stopped signaling to their microbial community. So they don't even join anymore. So
they're isolated.
Wheat cultivars no longer communicate with this fungus that they need in the root system, the mycorrhizae.
They're lonely.
They're so lonely.
Depressed.
Very depressed and isolated. And then you're eating that food that doesn't have these metabolites that we need for our well-being. So it's why it's so critical to be asking the question of whoever's supplying your food or the brands or the different organizations and say, are these people building diversity in their ecosystem? Are they building diversity in that microbiome? Because that's
and the ecosystem. So it starts with the soil, and by having healthy soil, the plants will prosper and become healthier. Therefore, humans would eat healthier. It will encourage more diversity of insects and birds, and it evolves from there.
It affects
biology.
Everything. So think about your overall well-being and vibrancy. Your ability to think creatively is impacted by your gut microbiome, which is impacted by, like all that diversity. the diversity of foods that you're eating, the diversity of the soil that they were grown in, and even having a little bit of soil in your diet, like just not washing that carrot off or whatever, is that all is contributing to your well-being. Like it literally is influencing how you think.
Wow.
Mm.
Okay. No, I'd love to.
Fight,
So there was there was a UN official a number of years ago made a statement, and he said we've got something like 50 to 60 years of topsoil left.
Yeah.
And it was a controversial comment that I don't know where this information came from specifically.
Nowhere. They could never find
Yeah,
it.
I think it's such a massively complex thing to articulate,
Yeah.
but it's become a common statistic which you hear. We've got 50 to 60 years of topsoil left on the planet because of chemical agriculture. We're consistently eroding our topsoil due to desertification for climate change. Our topsoil is becoming worse and worse. So we've only got 50 to 60 years of harvest ahead of us. What are your thoughts about that? Your hands are much more in the soil than the average person, and you have a much more global perspective on this.
Well, I think that the comment was clickbait. You know, it's just the society we're in right now is looking for these big headlines and something to attract them. And it's a conversation topic. No, we're not going to run out of topsoil in 30 to 60 years. But what we're seeing, I mean, I just think it goes back to your comment, Steve, about like it's all interrelated. The well-being of society and the financial abilities and our health, everything relates to this topic, and it is eroding. So we lose anywhere from 5 to 100 tons of topsoil per hectare per year. Like we're literally, this is eroding away around us, and often it's invisible to people, right? You might see it coming out in the waterways. You might see it blowing. Like we're seeing huge dust storms in the US. Like they go all the way from the top of Canada down to Texas. Like that, people are dying in them too due to like car accidents because you can't see on the highways. So people are having car accidents because of this eroding. And, you know, I think it points to what's going on at every single level, is that we know what's happening right now is unworkable. We know that we're consuming faster than what we certainly need. I mean, every aspect of society right now is hitting those perfect storms, you know, and we're looking at water access right now, which I know is not a problem in Ireland, but
Definitely not.
But seeing what's going on, and yeah, I'm not an apocalypse thinker. I think it's interesting to kind of think about it, but I'm more interested in how do we turn the ship around right now, because what society's doing is we're actually just putting our foot to the floor. Like we're accelerating to going off a cliff. So while we know about climate change, we know about soil erosion, we know about food quality and well-being, and all of this is on a decline, it's speeding up in the wrong direction. And what's it going to take for us to kind of pull the handbrake and turn around? And that's where I'm really passionate about. That's the work that we do, is in the behavior change space.
Yeah, it's when you talk about it like that in that context, because I know through soil erosion, we're pretty much just leveraging. Soil takes, I don't know how, thousands of years to create, you know, from dead. Am I right in thinking that good quality, healthy soil? How long would it take to create?
Vermicast, you can get stuff going quick.
Well, you guys are building soil right now on the farm, right? So if you look at your journey just in the last 2 years, we can already see soil building processes in those top 5 centimeters. You can see all that mixing starting to happen. So we can build topsoil and we can start to mineralize soils much faster than what soil scientists will tell you. So a soil scientist might say, you know, in 1,000 years you can build a centimeter. We are building on some properties. We've been building a millimeter of soil a month. So we have the ability to do topsoil development pretty rapidly if we really look at. And what I think is exciting is we're bringing together some of the best of science with some of the best indigenous ancestral knowledge and combining that and really understanding why is it that people used to use practices like incorporating seaweed, or why were they using willows, you know, using willow bark and soaks, and even some of the biodynamic principles, which probably many of your listeners are not familiar with, but
planting a horn,
the cow horn
on the full moon with manure in the corner
and
of your
turning
garden,
it like
which sounds
50
very
ways clockwise. And I remember doing that in West Virginia, Missouri, back
Missouri.
25 years ago.
Yeah.
And thinking it was like, wow, this is witchcraft. This is cool. I love this.
But one of the things that we use in biodynamics is a practice where you stuff a cow horn with silica, very fine silica.
Silica is a type of chalk or something, isn't it? It's a
Silicates you can get from like diatomaceous, like diatoms.
stone.
Yeah.
It's kind of, it's used
Ground
in
up.
cement and stuff.
But what they're seeing now is if you can form something called bioamorphic silica, which is the relationship with biology and silica, we can increase the molecular ability to hold on to water by 700. So you can go from 1 molecule of water to 700 molecules of water storage. You're basically forming silicon gels in soils. So this idea of like water holding capacity, especially in dryland environments that I work in, is stimulating those microbes. And it explains why Rudolf Steiner was so passionate about something like silica. You know, it increases the energy in a soil and it increases this
hydration, and therefore in a warm, because obviously it's the
Hydration,
compound
bacteria.
between,
Number one of the key things to any bacteria is temperature and water.
Yeah. But it's like what he was doing was so discredited and so poo-pooed, and now it's like our ability to measure some of these things, even like the secondary metabolites. 10 years ago, people didn't even know what these things were in food.
what is a secondary metabolite? Because loads of people listening are going, I'm struggling here now.
So if you like to get high, those are secondary metabolites. So
Okay, cool.
THC, opium,
They're all secondary metabolites.
psilocybin.
They're like a byproduct of a plant.
It's a byproduct of the plant. So think primary metabolites are fats, proteins, cellulose, like your macros,
and
right?
Micros,
But
vitamins and minerals.
plants don't have to have necessarily a secondary metabolite to survive, right? It's almost like it's the icing on the cake. It's what plants using to communicate, to say, I'm under attack and I want to bring in a parasitic wasp, for instance. It has a secondary metabolite.
And is it almost like the plant's way of communicating with microbes?
Yeah.
They're true secondary metabolites. Like
Yes.
phylas or phylas, are those the type of microbes?
Microbial groups, yeah. But even
Files.
in your body, we have different types of molecules that are switching on activity or switching on gene expression. So the secondary metabolites that can turn genes on or off to activate. So it might be a gene for the plant to be more resistant to disease or more resistant to wet soils. There'll be a molecule that can actually generate that ability for that gene to switch on and off. You know, in the human body, we have these issues. We're having either gene expression creating autoimmune disorders, or like for me, I have a mutation in the MTHFR gene, which I won't tell you what that means. But it's the gene.
Is that good or bad?
Well, it's just when the doctor told me what it was called, it involved 2 swear words that stand for MTHFR. So I'll leave that to your imagination, right?
You got that one.
And
this is a crossword.
there's a crossword.
I got it.
Hey!
I got it.
Or a wordle, right? But that those genes enable people to detoxify, right? It's the methylation pathway in the liver for your body to detox. So for me, both those genes have been switched off. My body won't detoxify properly. Now, part of the signaling in the methylation pathways is about the secondary metabolites, is this ability for genes to be turned on or off. So a lot of the insecticides and fungicides used in agriculture, they switch genes off. And they switch the genes off in the plant for things that they might be using to defend themselves. So
Is that like glyphosate, for example, is used to dry out wheat?
Yes,
And it's
so-
very much known, like it's believed to be influencing certain types of autoimmune diseases.
that's right. And it's because of our ability to measure these things, we haven't really caught up with what are we doing when we're tinkering with these things and what does it mean. But one thing that we're seeing is we now have over 600 different plants that are herbicide resistant, that you can spray them and they won't die with the use of herbicides. So we're seeing this massive boom in herbicide resistant weeds, to the point now where we're losing large amounts of production because people can no longer control them with herbicides. But that's okay, because they're going to genetically engineer plants so you can spray them with dicamba and 2,4-D and they won't die, but the crops around them will die. So we've got this mentality of like, we need a bigger hammer.
So it's kind of going military. It's
Military.
going full war
Yes.
for against.
But as a result, the
biology.
crop you're growing, which is meant to be the food that's going to nourish you, is deficient, it's toxic, it's poisonal, it's
Yeah.
grown up in this toxic, isolated monoculture.
Can I just
soup.
bring it back up here for anyone listening is going, like, you know, like, and this was a conversation I had with a friend recently. They said, like, they were saying, oh, geez, yeah, the food in America, or whatever they use, like North America, there's so much sprays. Like, I've seen videos of planes flying over and spraying fields. But we're in Europe, it's very different over here. Like, you know, we're in Ireland, we're in England, we're in like Germany or Holland. Oh, it's very different over here. We're in Australia. Like, what are your thoughts in terms of the current food system and the degree that farmers are, you know, and it's certainly not a fault to the farmer. It's the system at large, but the degree that people are spraying or not spraying on food. Like, if you go into the supermarket, is the probability that the food is sprayed or not sprayed?
Oh no, your food is sprayed here, but we just don't have the same degree of certainly genetic engineering. But also, it's so interesting to me is how they put genetically engineered corn syrup into nearly every additive in the US. Like, it's just in all the foods. Like, so you would
And
have.
is that because it's so cheap, or what is the
Well,
main?
it's highly subsidized, right? And you could go to the nth degree and go, well, we know it's causing human health issues. But if you buy like a can of Coke, if you like Coke, in America, it's made with corn syrup. Everywhere else in the world, it's made with sugar. And what we're seeing is just some really interesting illnesses in America. And my son came over to visit recently, and you know, he drinks dairy products in New Zealand, and he gets to the US and he is violently ill for like 6 weeks. He just couldn't eat the foods he could normally eat, which is, you know, dairy products, cheese, Doritos, like just the normal stuff that a 23-year-old eats. He got really, really sick by, and I'm like, what is so intrinsically different with the American system? There's the corn syrups. There is potentially perhaps more pesticides, more fungicides on things. But I think the genetic engineering is certainly at the core of it. But the American, like if you walk into stores in America, they have an entire aisle or large sections of that aisle dedicated to things to either make you poop or stop you pooping. And everyone I talk to, people, you know, Americans are on 5 different medications by the time they're 60, I believe, 65. So, you know, there's a huge amount of medication in the country, probably higher antibiotic use potentially in the food as well. And so we're just seeing, you know, the amount of preservatives in your food. They now say that preservatives really act like an antibiotic in the gut. So if you're not eating well in that fast food generation, it all comes down to gut health, just the same as it does with soil health, right? Same thing.
And in terms of someone who's living, say, for example, in England or Scotland or Germany or Ireland, like the probability is, my own naive point of view is that the vast majority of the food all over the world is sprayed because, you know, within the system of the economic system which we're in, you know, we're all looking for a shortcut to make money. That's how the system kind of rewards us or incentivizes us. And my own understanding, you can clarify this because you know much better than me, is that the vast majority of food will be sprayed in that context because it can be more efficient. You know, it's believed to be more efficient, and that's how the system kind of unfolds. Am I right in thinking that or wrong?
Yeah. And I think here too, you've got a lot more tillage. So there's a lot of cultivation, and that is also
What's
having an
tillage now
influence.
for
So with
anyone?
that, you know, where you're turning soil over and
So rotivating it.
And releasing the
What does-
carbon in the soil and breaking up the mycorrhizal.
releasing carbon, breaking up all those microbial communities, just, yeah. And so
tillage, yeah.
then in turn, we see that has an impact on food quality. So there's kind of a bunch of different factors happening here. But certainly the amount of nitrogen use in this country is obscene. And you can see it. It's in your waterways, right? So,
And nitrogen would be a mineral which we're feeding our plants because the soil is deficient in it.
well, I think it goes back to your military analogy. So the use of nitrogen fertilizers came out as a byproduct of World War II, of like World War I as well. But we have the Haber-Bosch process. We have this ability to split the nitrogen atom because right now it's all in the atmosphere. It's not taken up by plants in that form. The atom needs to be split. So they had all this leftover nitrogen from making bombs. And they're like, what are we going to do with it? Oh, well, actually, if you put it on a field, it grows more, it yields more in fields that haven't been very well microbially managed. And so out of the military came this whole industrial approach to food production. And so we're seeing nitrogen being used around the world and it continues to rise. And people believe that that's what it takes to feed society. But actually, half of what's driven the increase in food production since those world wars was actually 50% of that was due to irrigation. And I think 40% of it was due to plant breeding. So people believe that it was the use of nitrogen fertilizers that has really enabled the explosion of the human population, but it wasn't. It's actually technology and our ability to break in land that we weren't on in the past. It's not just the fertilizers. And what we find is if your soil's in really good shape, nitrogen doesn't work, or we don't get any additional yield. But the fascinating side effect is you're putting nitrogen on is that, one, it compacts your soil, and two, it actually makes those crops more attractive to insect pests. So we're seeing pest losses, food losses to insects just go through the roof. And now we're seeing superbugs that are not being affected by the insecticides, or are actually stimulated by insecticides while everything else collapses. Our native bees and pollinators. And
Wow, it seems. Can I go?
Yeah, sure.
It seems that a huge amount of modern day illnesses, like when we were growing up, I knew one or two people in the whole school that had allergies. Yeah, and it was really rare. And growing up, I think I knew two people in the town that had allergies. Not that I knew that many people, but allergies weren't prolific. Whereas nowadays, like in both my son's classes, they're not allowed any nuts. Like there's in every class, there's and
In a lot of planes you go on, you're on
there's special needs teachers in every class because there's been an increase in special needs assistance required in school. It seems like as a society there's a lot more. There's obviously more humans, but there's seems to be a lot more illness. And I wonder, I look at rise in celiac disease, rise in allergies. Even the cafe, the 20 years we've had the cafe, when we first opened, there was very little talk about allergies, and it started out with being wheat was one, and now suddenly there's 9 of them. And it seems to be just getting more and more complicated.
Yeah.
Is part of this, the story of this is down to the fact that the way we're treating soil and the way we're growing our food?
Yeah. I think there's multiple aspects, all, again, creating the perfect storm. One is this gene expression piece, right? So that MTHFR gene that I have that's switched on was switched on with my grandparents. It's epigenetics. So their exposure to chemicals, they were fine. They lived long, healthy lives. My parents are probably going to be fine, live long and healthy lives. My generation are probably not going to outlive my parents. And they're not going to live out my parents because of this gene expression that's been switched on. We're not able to detoxify. My brother has ankylosing spondylitis. It's a nasty type of arthritis where basically he forms spurs on his bones, and those bone spurs are even forming inside his spine. So with ankylosing spondylitis, you can actually require medical intervention where they have to drill down in your spine to make room for your nerves. And what he's found is that it flares up when he's exposed to maltodextrin, which is a common additive that you see on potato chips. It's in everything.
So it uses a sweetener.
But it's causing inflammation in his body. So what we're seeing with allergies is basically an autoimmune or an inflammation. The gut there's dysbiosis in the gut. Why is there dysbiosis in the gut? Well, you don't have an intact microbiome. We're ingesting pesticides and herbicides. We're eating processed food. We don't have nutrient density in the food anymore. So depends what literature you look at, but let's say 46% of nutrients is no longer in the food. One, because we're feeding it NPK. We're not looking at
NPK being
nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, the industrial model. We're growing food in monocultures. We're doing you might rotate 2 crops. There's no diversity in that field, so you're not getting different plants, then contributing to the diversity of these metabolites that you need for human health, right? So we've got less vitamins, less lycopene, whatever it is that you're measuring in your plant that has been lost. So we're creating these monocultures in the land that's creating a monoculture in the gut, which is then causing inflammation. Right? And then people aren't eating a diversity of food. They're not exposed to soil. Like, you want your children to go out and eat soil. Like, if you did nothing else,
not like have a bowl of soil, but
go
just
out
play
there
in it,
and
be
play
part of
in
it,
it.
interact with it, and
we're
therefore
too clean. Like, I think we're going to see a whole
animal, play with
get
horses,
dogs, everything. But what we're seeing is that decline in the microbiome. And my concern about what happened with COVID is you've just wiped everyone's slate clean and made people afraid of each other, but also of biology. Right? You don't want to have clean spaces. Right? You don't want everything pristine and shiny and clean, because what it's doing is wiping out the diversity in your gut.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it really seems like you talking, it just reminds me of how we are an intrinsic part, we are a direct reflection of nature,
Yes.
and it's a very much a symbiotic system, and how we're dealing with nature now, with most of us living in urban environments and the majority of food being grown in monocultures using pesticides, fungicides, herbicides, is a reflection of ourselves with our own ecosystems in our own guts, which are pretty much mini, representations of what's going on in the soil. And it seems like this symbiotic relationship is just mirroring one another. As the soil and biodiversity erodes, so does the human health, because they're directly influenced by one another.
Yeah. And I think what's happened in the last couple of 100 years is we've shifted our paradigm, we've shifted our relationship to the sacred and to the landscape, and we've moved into a world of I'm going to dominate and I'm going to make the world fit to me. And that is intrinsically the core of what is wrong with the world. Instead of how do I fit myself to the world? How do I work with nature's rules and nature's principles? Even if you're in an apartment building, is that we're still part of nature, and yet we have this sense of separation and sense of domination or control, or like that we're not privy to nature. And at the end of the day, she's going to kick our asses, and she is already. I can call her a she.
No, I love that. Like for people listening, and even for myself, who's kind of feeling a little disillusioned and a little kind of like, oh my God. And maybe,
another thing
like,
that we're doing.
No,
Crap, what do we do?
bro.
And I didn't even do my yoga today. I didn't do my journaling. I forgot my gratitude journal. And now you're telling me
I'm eating too
that
much chemicals.
oh my God.
Like where can we start, and what are little baby things? Because it seems like there's monocultures of the land, there's monocultures of our schooling systems, there's monocultures of the mind. We get caught in these little echo chambers online, etc.,
Ooh,
etc.
nice one, Stevie.
Thank you,
Yeah.
You
David.
piggybacked that, I heard.
Yeah, that's good.
That was good.
I'll take it.
But where do we start, and how do we how do we start to regenerate? Because you said there that we can grow kind of a millimeter of soil a month. How can we start to create that?
Or even I know in your own work that you start with the person rather than with the soil.
I do start with the person rather than the soil.
When
know,
you're coaching farmers, like you'll
I
start
do think
with
stress is a really big one, and stress is a vicious cycle as well. But stress influences your microbiome. So what are you doing with self-care, the gratitude journal, that's cool. Diversity of foods, right? How many different types of foods? I take a fulvic acid every day. So I try to. I am at the moment.
Fulvic or folic?
Fulvic.
It
So
sounds
not
like volcanic. Is that like
FULVIC, a binder, some kind of carbon-based binder that's going to bind to any ag chemical that you might be exposed to in your day-to-day life, right? And they're not very expensive. So I just put that in.
And where do you just get it online?
You can just
Fulvic
get it.
acid.
Yep.
It's an acid, or it's just fulvic?
It's called fulvic acid.
Okay.
never heard of that?
And do you get it like in some sort of a little pill that you take?
just a little pill, or you can get a couple of drops and you can just drip it.
Fulvic
get it as a
acid. And what
liquid.
did you say it does? It binds with carbon.
With ag chemicals,
It binds
fine.
with ag chemicals.
like such as pesticides, fungicides, herbicides.
it relaxes
glyphosate.
the villi of the gut.
villi, the little
The
hairs.
things and things to absorb. It builds your tight junctions. So many
Leaky gut. And
people
this is
with
a
leaky gut and little parcels of poop from microbes passing into your bloodstream. It actually helps to heal those tight junctions.
Oh, nice.
So 90% of people test for glyphosate in their urine. I test 0, and the reason I test 0 is because I'm binding that glyphosate. So we know that we're being exposed. It's in the rainwater. It's in your food. So how can I help? And it's interesting. We feed that to livestock too. So my people that I work with, that's part of our programs. Is we know that there's chemicals in the environment. This is one way we can just kind of support But diversity of foods, right?
Yeah.
How many different foods, and count it, right? It's
30,
a fun
aim
game.
for 30
to
different
play.
plant-based foods a week.
Yeah,
at a
So I
minimum.
did a diary trying to look at, okay, I wonder how many I'm eating, and I eat 30 foods in 2 days. I was like,
Yeah.
okay, cool. So, getting fermented foods, your kimchi, like old ways of fermenting food. All right, what else could you do? Yogurts. Just think biology, diversity. And don't wash your carrots if they come from an organic, regenerative place.
Yeah.
I was
Go,
going to
go,
ask, on top of that, Fulvic acid, which is very
Fulvic.
interesting. I've never heard of it. Is it Fulvic?
No, obviously you've got
Vulvic.
with an F.
Vulva.
Yeah.
Fulvic.
Fulvic.
There you are.
But
I
that's
was
cool.
thinking
We've
vulva on
got
the
to bring
mind.
in the feminine energy.
Fulvic. I was thinking Volvic. Okay, sorry.
That would take you down another.
Yeah. But it reminds
No, I
me
have
of.
to tell you a funny story. So
I like funny stories.
we got.
Great.
And then I'll come back to it.
Let me come back to your serious one. But we got geese. We got some guard geese, and we were trying to figure out how to use sex.
What noise does a goose make again?
Or
Sorry,
like
yeah.
when they're really mad.
Oh, yeah.
But we wanted to figure out what sex they were because we had a male and a female, and we couldn't tell which was which. And I had some to give away. So my mum puts into the Google search sexing goslings. Apparently Ryan Gosling has a lot of sex tapes because that's all that came up was like pages and pages about Ryan Gosling's sex life, and we were trying to figure. No, we wanted to know if it was a male or a female. So we called our goose Ryan Gosling, and he loves me.
He loves
Ryan
He
you.
loves me.
Gosling
Ryan
loves you.
Gosling loves me. Just
He follows you around all the time.
He does, yeah.
How did you find out it was a he?
Because he's huge and quite masculine, and he loves me.
And he's a man.
He's a manly goose. Anyway, continue with your
Ryan Gosling.
question.
Okay, I was going to say on the topic of fulvic acid and taking that to kind of, to take ag chemicals out
Knowing
of your
that I'm
body.
not a nutritionist
No,
or a
you're not
health practitioner,
but this is your own
what I
personal
do.
philosophy, which
Yeah,
I must
yeah,
look
yeah.
into, and everyone must take responsibility themselves for it.
That's
But
right.
I know Zach Bush, he's a big advocate of taking ancient soils. Like he has
So that's
some,
a fulvic acid.
yeah, because that was
Yeah.
the first time he talked about that, like, there's more biology in ancient soils than anything else. So he has some ancient soil.
So there's
which
not
he
more
drinks.
biology, but there's more of these secondary metabolites and proteins, right?
Okay, yeah.
65 million year old proteins that cause these what we
Tight
call
junctions.
well, it
Anthocyan-
causes a process that we call quorum signaling, or
Yeah.
so it's this metabolite communication in the gut. So you
Wow.
don't need to necessarily eat a probiotic. You need to switch the signal on for that microbiology to respond. So right now, a lot of people are turning on the signal for candida instead of a diversity of organisms in their gut. And it's all about the signals. So those are latent signaling molecules. So we use them on land to switch biology on, switch on activity, as opposed to just the presence or absence, and change disease organisms from being diseases to actually beneficial. It's all about signaling.
This is mind blowing.
I know, it's so
secondary
exciting.
metabolites
And the
turning things-
signaling are like the little creatures in your gut who are
genes.
just
It's like
It's what they're
gene expressions.
releasing, their exudates.
chemicals. Yeah.
So if you think about it in the gut or in the soil, if there's no light, right? They can't see, they can't hear, but these microbes are communicating all the time, and they're communicating using these signals. So you imagine every single cell, which includes the cells in
Morse
your body,
code.
has 100,000 receptors on the outside of those cells. And they're waiting for a receptor to respond or the gene to switch on depending on the signal it receives. So that could signal a behavior change. It could signal a gene to change to the environment depending on the signal it's receiving. So this is why we need diversity and we need nutrition so that we can respond.
Our friend, a dear friend, gastroenterologist Dr. Alan Desmond, he talks about within the gut, like the gut microbes will convert certain
yeah.
types of fiber into short chain fatty acids, which I imagine is a secondary metabolite, and these short chain fatty acids influence neurochemicals in our brain via the vagus nerve. Now,
Yes.
I could have butchered that completely.
Close.
But
It's
there's
good.
some
That's
kind
fine.
of some kind of
You sound
influence.
smart, Dave.
Yeah, it sounded smart.
you did sound
I'm
super
I'm only trying to regurgitate in
And
a
sometimes,
half.
Dr. Al stuff.
sometimes we don't need all the technical
But the understanding is that
is
the probability
it's cool.
within our gut, there's these secondary metabolites which are being created, which are
Which
good
need
for our health.
fiber. Which
Yeah,
causes
so we need fiber. We need that starch-resistant fiber. You need but it's diversity of food. Diversity.
Well,
Even
okay,
like,
yeah, we're back to that, yeah.
and the signals are parts per trillion. So it could be a little sprinkling of turmeric. It could be a little sprinkling of cinnamon. It doesn't have to be a lot to be signaling and changing what that microbial community is doing.
Wow.
So start wherever you're at.
Start wherever
So that's
you're
first
at.
step of hope.
Yep.
First step of hope for anyone listening who's feeling
Yep.
afraid, fed up, like I can't do it.
Yeah.
Start
Stress.
with yourself.
Yeah.
Start with stress, whatever the hell it is that makes you chill
Which
out.
is a big topic in itself, right?
Yeah,
It's a big hairy one, but hey, each of us-
what do you do when you often deal with cowboys, and cowboys are pretty chill, but say you meet a
Yeah, they're quite stressed. Ranchers
They
are
are.
stressed.
So how do you
dead.
help them, or how do you address them? Because they're typically people who spend time outside, they're spending time with natural ecosystems,
Yeah.
and they're obviously stressed due to financial pressure or whatever it may be.
Climate.
How do you help them? Yeah, how do you help them, or like how do we?
You know, it's quite interesting because I always work with them a little differently. And first of all, it takes trust, right? We've got to build a bit of trust. But we talk about what do we love, you know, and I'll say, take me to the place on the ranch that you love. What do you love about this? What do you remember about this when you were a child? What did you love growing up? Why are you ranching? And what we're doing then is changing this ventral vagal system, right? Putting people into that gratitude space. Then what it does is it changes your ability to learn and to think and take on new information. And I don't know if you did this with the guy that was talking about this on your podcast, but one of the things we know is that when you're in that flight or fight phase, your energies will go into your limbs, to your legs to run. And what it does is it takes that away from your eyes and away from your brain. So people's ability to see becomes very focused like this. So I ask a rancher, bring your hands out, and at what point can you see your fingers wiggling? Right? And you should be way back here, right? Just look at one point, keep your eye going straight ahead. And where do you see both? Like I've had a migraine this morning, so mine's here, right? I can see both fingers wiggling, but I've got ranches that are here.
Wow.
And I'm like, whoa, you're in a high flight and fight state. Tell me about the last time you hurt yourself. And they'll be like, oh, you know, I hit my thumb with a hammer, but it was all right. I didn't feel it. And I'm like, well, the reason you didn't feel it is that your body's preparing to die. Like you've been under so much stress for so long that your body, it's like if you've ever seen one of those National Geographics where the lion will take down an antelope and it grabs it by the nose and it stops struggling because the antelope knows that it's going to die. And what happens is it floods the body with the hormones that stop you feeling pain because the body thinks it's about to die. And so I'm dealing with ranchers and farmers that have been at high stress for so long that they've stopped feeling.
Good God.
That's frightening.
It is. It's really frightening, but it's also really exciting because we have these conversations and then it's like, what can we do to reset? And it only takes like 30 seconds for us to reset some of these pathways. Nutrition's a big part of it. Breathing. And I don't make it weird because they get a little bit freaked out when we talk about breathing exercises, but I'm like, go down the back of the ranch and I want you just to do box breathing, 3 seconds in, hold it, 3 seconds out, hold it, basic stuff because a lot of people are hyperventilating, right? They're not breathing properly and not getting oxygen through their body. And if we can shift to gratitude and get that whole system rebooted, your blood flows an additional 5 miles through the body. 5 miles. Did you know that?
No.
That's how
but it's
cool is that,
It's
right?
exciting.
Because what happens is the capillaries relax. They open up. We get better flow and then we get better thinking. So often I'll be with a cropping guy and he'll say, every time I talk to you, I get a headache. And I'm like, thanks, buddy.
What a compliment.
Thanks so much. But it's
'cause
because they're in these hypervigilant stress states and it's really hard to think and really hard to take on new information. So I have a lot of empathy when I'm dealing with farmers is they are incredibly stressed and up against the wall and dealing with legislation pressures or people telling them that what they're doing is terrible and like, or you're an animal killer or all these things that's hitting agriculture right now. And farmers feel like they're backed into a corner. And so we work from how do we start to relax? How do we feel joy and love so we can start to think creatively again? And it just opens up whole new doorways of people being able to take new actions because farmers are some of the most innovative people I know. They're absolutely brilliant at like problem solving. And if I can give them some concepts, they can actually work out things that I could never imagine.
Like the farmer
Incredibly
traditionally
smart.
was like one of the
Yeah.
smartest people in society. They could not only read the weather, they could read the
Problem solve.
ecosystems. They had
Yes.
such a broad knowledge.
Yeah. And
And it still is,
industrialization
yeah.
has
Reduce
forced
the farmer.
people to stop thinking and stop being creative and just get in your machine and you put on 250 kilos and you spray on a calendar and you harvest at this date. And you don't harvest at this date, but it's encouraged people to just kind of flatline. And what's exciting is about you reconnect people to soil and to nutrition is suddenly this becomes very joy-filled. Suddenly it becomes possibility and opportunity. And I watch people shift from this really kind of heavy furrow brow, like even their faces change because all the muscles change in your face and you get relaxed. Like it's incredible to see just by shifting our relationship to land, how that opens up possibility.
It sounds like the
Wow.
path to regeneration is that it starts with the individual. So for anyone listening who's feeling very afraid of the future, it starts with each one of us the opportunity to change our microbiome, and as we change that, the signal that we're emitting will affect those around us.
But also you can feel each other's you can feel the signals with each other. So what they've found is, like, you might have heard that thing of like women living together menstruate together.
Yeah.
They menstruate together depending on who the alpha female is. Right? You guys have heard that.
Yeah.
So, but these molecules we're communicating with all the time. So if we start to feel more joy filled, then the impact that has on your family as well. Like if we're dealing with shame and blame and like overwhelm, which is what's been happening with the climate crisis, people put their foot to the floor and we're going off the cliff. Right? That's what happens, is that everything shuts down. Our ability to be creative and think outside the box shuts down. And so this is my challenge to all of us, is how do I get myself back into a more grounded, relaxed, ventral vagal state, right? And then we can think, and then we can think creatively, and we can think outside the box, because
then
if
we can
just
connect. Then we can interconnect, because if we are shut off and in fight or flight, we're very much not connected to ourselves, and therefore not connected to other and the macro information. Okay,
I got one exciting one, just a slight little deviation.
Yeah.
When we met you first a few days ago, you spoke about one of the most frightening things you ever did was you were speaking to a group of 700 farmers.
Yeah.
And you did whaling.
Yes.
I wonder, could you talk about that? Because that's quite remarkable. And that when I heard that, I was just like,
so if you think of the process of, or the practice of wailing or keening, so something that you might have seen happen at a funeral.
Never seen it. I read about it in a traditional African book where when the grandfather died, the town came together and wailed for hours, like screamed and bawled, and it was this huge process of grief.
Yeah.
Physical catharsis.
Yeah.
So the Irish had a tradition of wailing, and in fact, you would pay professional wailers to come to or keeners to come to funerals. So in New Zealand, it's still part of Māori traditions, is so Indigenous people to wail at grief, right? To sing from the bowels of your body and to just let that out. But what you see around the world, I mean, and pretty much every single Indigenous ancestral culture has this tradition of wailing or keening. The church said no, that actually is, connects you to the spirits, which it does. It connects you, the devil, but it connects you to the earth. It grounds you. I mean, it helps you work through trauma. Is it actually activates all these cells, like everything wakes up in that process. And I don't know if you guys have ever done it, but oh my gosh, go down to the beach
I can imagine,
and wail.
Singing makes like that physical,
but it's also
expression.
That wildness. The wildness, you suddenly lose yourself
so
to
primal.
It's like dancing, and when you reach that really big sweaty state, you're just lost. You're no longer an individual. You are the music.
You are moving to the music in a very integrated fashion, whatever, and arrange it in this absolute. It's the same as what do you call that? What do you call those birds? A murmuring of birds.
Yeah,
it's the
the
same like a murmuring.
And
of
imagine
humans
wailing
dancing in
is
a
the
rave.
same way. You're allowing emotions to come through you and to lose yourself through this process.
Lose yourself to the moment, the music. You better. Sorry,
the moment.
That was
All right,
awful.
so you could go down to the beach and even just to do a whale song. Like to just do that.
We're not talking about to summon whales.
No, but you could. I mean, that
Yeah,
would be
who
cool,
knows?
wouldn't it? Yeah. So I had this event. It was 750 people, and someone the day before was doing a presentation, and he said climate change and yada yada yada, and I was so activated. I'm like, are we at the yada 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 stage of climate change? Like literally, our life support systems are failing, and we're saying yada yada yada.
What does yada yada yada?
Like, et cetera, et
That's
cetera.
fine.
It's
Yeah.
the stuff, that's happening, yada, yada, yada. And so I thought, no, if we don't confront grief, if we don't confront trauma, if we don't confront the unworkability of the world, and we just become shut down to it, we don't get to move through it. You just sit in it. You think, oh, well, I'm just going to ignore it. Is that, stiff upper lip, or just shovel it underneath the carpet, and we don't confront it. And you see it happening a lot with Indigenous trauma, right? Of what communities have done is to never acknowledge this has happened, so then that we can move forward. And it's like, where's this acknowledgement piece? So with 750 people, I put up all these slides of, like insect populations are crashing. There's forever chemicals in umbilical cords. There's fish dying, the reef dying, like, rah, like all these systems are falling apart, and we've become numb. And so what we did is we did 6 minutes of leading people through a keening or a wailing and a crying and an expression
That must
of
have been frightening
emotions.
to do it. Like to stand there in front of 700 people and go,
The most terrifying thing I've ever done in my life. And I thought this could go really badly, because you're going to activate people, and it's like, I'm not responsible for your activation, right? If I activate you, that's your activation. It's not mine. Like, I'm going to upset people. I know I do anyway, right? I know that I get people activated. That's okay. That needs to come up. It's like a pustular wound that we need to pop. And so we went through this process. Nobody died, which was good.
and what's the process? Like,
We wailed, we cried, we sang.
Lord.
and did everyone just get in?
So I had a friend who was an opera singer, which may not have been the best
Tan.
way to do it, but I think it was beautiful. I mean, she had the most incredible voice, and you're in this great big wooden meeting house. So the sound was, you can't help but not be moved by an opera singer's voice. Like the movement of voice
sheer
through your body.
volume.
Oh my gosh. So you're moving every single cell, and just kind of acknowledging of the unworkability of modern society. And at the end of that, I got back up on stage and kind of collect myself and
And were people wailing? Were screaming and shouting and
singing, mainly singing. It's a big ask to take someone really into a deep wail. But then I led them through gratitude. Remember that person that got underneath your wings, that one that made a difference in your life and saw you and supported you no matter what. So for me, it's my grandmother. It didn't matter what I did. My Nana loved me. I would say the most ridiculous things and the naughty things I was up to, and she'd be like, oh, silly girl. Like she just loved me no matter what. She was unconditional. And so if you think about that person, it changes the cells in your body. Your blood flow begins to circulate that additional 5 miles by just thinking of that person that you love and who loved you. So I led them through that. And then afterwards, a friend of mine actually had to get a ride with a scientist, and she didn't know her very well, but she said to the lady,
as in a lift in the car.
a lift in the car, a couple of hours up the road, and she said, how did you find that? And the scientist was like, that was quite uncomfortable. She's like, yeah, it was, wasn't it? And she said, but a decade ago, my father passed away, and I have never thought of him again. I didn't grieve for him. I didn't feel grateful for him. I haven't even thought about him. He died. He was gone. And she said, in that moment of gratitude, I connected to my father, and I connected to him from love and gratitude. And I just never thought that something like that would ever happen. So I'm like, if we are able to walk through the grief or swim deep, like David White's poem about diving into the well of grief and going down through the darkness until you reach the bottom, and at the bottom are the coins that those who were never brave enough to swim through that well of grief, there are the coins that others were making wishes with, and you can find that and then swim back up. You've managed to go through that darkness and that grief, and there's gold at the bottom. And that's what the invitation is how do we start to swim through and move through trauma and grief? Because if we don't, we're never going to find that gold at the bottom of the well.
And we're never going to take our foot off.
I
the
love that
accelerator.
analogy.
Oh, David White.
Beautiful.
I think he's an Irish poet. Beautiful.
Phenomenal.
Wow, very touching. Well done to you. So brave.
Oh, well, oh, yeah.
But to stand there in front of 700 people and have the courage to do that, that's frightening. Even to me hearing it, I'm like, oh.
It was quite intense. But I think there's something on the edge for us to explore. And there's those of us that are the explorers, like you guys, just willing to push that. And there's always the risk, and there's the risk of people not appreciating or loving what you're doing at all. And you're never going to please everybody. But if we don't move into discomfort, then we're never going to learn, and we're never going to transform.
Amazing. Okay, I'm going to start moving this now to land this ship now.
To land
This ship.
Yeah,
to land this
ship.
plane.
Well
so we've
done.
got to tie it all back up. And there's one thing before we kind of go into summarizing it is really about, and this is, I was chatting with Kiva earlier, and she was saying that like everyone listening goes, well, I want to eat organic food. Like I want to eat local organic food, but the system doesn't tend to support me because it's too expensive. Like
It's elitist.
it's elitist, and I end up shopping in the value supermarkets and buy low cost food because I can't afford it, even though I want to. So what?
and
like,
there's often shame attached to it.
is
Yeah,
this
there's
a
a lot of
systemic
shame.
issue that just within our societies that only the people who have enough money can afford the healthy local food, or is it more that we need to, as individuals, get better at trying to grow our own food or connect to local people growing more food, or what? When I say that, what thoughts come to your head?
So the food system right now is not broken. It's doing absolutely everything it was intended to do, which is produce low cost, low value, industrialized, centralized systems, right? And as a consequence, you're buying your medical bill from your Aldi or wherever you're going to shop with, right? And there's no guilt associated with that. It's just the system.
You're
that
buying
we're
your
in.
medical bill as in you're eating poor food, and as a result, you're more likely to get ill.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, one, I think a lot of this is coming from putting pressure on the system, like the brands. So we're seeing about 50% of brands right now are putting regenerative statements out there, regenerative commitments to have at least 50% of food by 2030 be grown regeneratively. And some of the largest brands are doing this. And I think
so regenerative
that really
means where the focus is on regenerating the soil, regenerating diversity, regenerating, biology.
Yes. So I think my request is, if you're seeing brands come out with those statements, is to ask them, how do they measure and monitor and know that those outcomes are being met? Are you improving soil health, diversity, and nutrient density? And how do they measure that? And because what I see is this is the future of food. So all food will be grown this way. And there's no reason for it to necessarily be more expensive, because what we find is it's actually more profitable for the farmers because you don't need all these excessive inputs, right? There's been quite a few studies to show that actually, on average, regenerative approaches to food systems are 78% more profitable for the producer.
It's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money, but at the moment farmers are being underpaid, right? The who's making the money is the middlemen.
Yeah, the chemical companies.
And farmers are under a lot of pressure, obviously, with climatic variability. But I think community-supported agricultural systems, community gardens, we're seeing more and more community systems being set up. Fall in love with a local nana who knows how to grow this food, adopt a grandparent and like learn how do we produce food as a community. One of my favorite things is just sprouting, right? Just get some sprouts, diverse plant sprouts, again, no soil, but at least starting to eat fresh, nutritious food.
100%.
Okay, final closing.
Can I just go for one little quick rapid fire? This is just quick rapid fire because I know Dave's...
You're rapid fire.
Okay, I'll be rapid.
So anyone listening who goes, is the answer vertical farming?
No.
Is the answer hydroponics?
No.
Is the answer soil?
Yes.
Boom. There you go. That was quick.
So I want you to think too, if we're getting into vertical farming and that push, look at the amount of plastics they're using. Look at the ground cover, the amount of plastics on ground is... The land is the womb. The land is the skin and the lungs of the planet. We don't want to be covering it with plastic. And we don't want to be using power to generate light when we have the sun. So just really getting reconnected to food systems. Why is your roof not covered with productive food? People want to get back onto the land. Why not, ecoscape all the cities and have food growing on walls and roofs and whatever. But to have soil involved in that. But I know it is hard sometimes if you're in the middle of the city to connect with the food producers and local production, but...
Guess it starts with the seed of awareness.
Seed of awareness. Yes.
And it is a seed because you've certainly awoken within me that each one of us are individually an intrinsic part of nature.
Yes.
And if I can take me personally, David, if I can take more responsibility for my own ecology, my own stresses, trying to make healthier plant-based food choices that are grown in, better systems. Mm-hmm. And that's going to result in me being more connected to the greater biology and more likely to flourish as a circumstance.
Yeah, and I think you probably have friends that are not very well connected. Is like cook food for them, get them reconnected to. I had the most nourishing meal at the Fulvic yesterday. It was fantastic, but you could feel that nourishment entering your body. I mean, it's just such a different eating experience. Like you feel totally satiated. It's like, can we collectively cook for each other? Can we reconnect as communities? Like have a whole hallway and say, right, let's get together and have a meal in the hallway and let's share food and celebrate that sacredness of food again.
I love that. Yes, please. Nicole, you are wonderful.
You're an
my
absolute
mind
gift.
has
You
been
guys.
bashed in so many different ways in
Seconding
the most
metabolites.
wonderful way. Like I feel like an egg has been cracked, and that's my mind.
Oh, I appreciate
most
and
wonderful way.
honor you guys so much. It's so much fun. I don't want to leave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, me too. I can feel
A little
my
baby.
family
A little
calling
baby
me.
calling.
Yes.
Calling
Yeah.
me,
Yeah. You're like,
literally vibrating my pocket.
For anyone listening who kind of wants to learn more, you're now running training programs.
Yes, we
like
got-
some really cool ones.
We've got a bunch of training programs, but one of them is a leadership program that I think if you are an influencer or you're involved in any kind of leadership in organizations, whatever it is, that's a really cool program. And we got some funding for that, so it's not very
What's that?
expensive. It's called Shift, shifting how influencers facilitate transformation, because I like acronyms. And yeah, that's available online at Integrity Soils. And then we have some of our like soil health courses that are really fun. They're only like 3 to 6 minute videos of like, how do I know if my soil is healthy? And then a masterclass on how do I build it? And then we have our great big Create
Your
program.
Worminar.
And my Worminar, which is free.
Sorry, you were
So,
going to
yeah.
talk about your great creative program.
And my great Create program, which is an agroecology professional program for someone that wants to do this for a living. Because there's a huge need for the connectors, the people working in agriculture and food production.
And you're going to have a huge, big facility on, what's the name of the park?
Right beside Yellowstone.
Yellowstone
yeah, in
Park,
Paradise
A
Valley. That's the
400
plan.
acre, 4 acre.
I hope so.
And no, it's coming. It's
It's
happening.
it's happening.
You're
Yeah.
raising money for it. You're raising 40 million or something.
So
wasn't
if
Yep.
anyone's listening and who kind of
has 40 million and wants
Yep.
to invest in a
And in the
in
in
wants
a
to
better
make a-
future,
a
Yes,
utopian
please.
Nicole,
Get in touch.
contact Nicole.
You
Yeah.
guys are dangerous. All right. Thanks. So fun.
Thank you, Nicole.
All right,
Thanks a
thank
million.
You the
All right.
queen. While we have you, once a week we write a newsletter. It's called Happier. It's got simple, tried and tested practices to make your life better.
We include recipes and practices that you can apply on a daily basis to make your life happier.
We've had lots of people say before that it's really helped make their life better. So you can sign up on the happypear.ie, our weekly newsletter called Happier.